Hi, I'm Father David. LGBTQ plus. Those letters together stir up so much controversy, love, care, and division in our world, our church, and our society. The share of the world's population identifying as LGBTQ plus is an average of 9%, according to a 2023 survey across 30 countries. On one hand, the Catholic Catechism claims that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered and against the natural law. On the other hand, the American Psychiatric Association's position is that same-sex attraction, whether it's expressed in action, fantasy, identity, implies no impairment in judgment, stability, reliability, or in general social or vocational interaction and capabilities. There are a variety of opinions and emotions about the LGBTQ plus community. So if you're listening and you are dealing with issues relating to your own sexuality, please stay with us in this conversation and you'll know that you are not alone. Today, we're going to be spending some time in conversation with Brother George Camacho, one of our Franciscan friars, about what it means to deal with issues relating to sexual identity. We will follow our discussion today, as usual, with resources for community support. So, gay, Catholic, and a Franciscan friar? How does that happen? Let's welcome Brother George to Friar Time. Let's start talking. In our society, the word gay doesn't mean just joyful anymore. It has a lot of other connotations in terms of sexual orientation, sexuality, who a person is and who they are in our society and in our church. Today, we are very happy to have Brother George Camacho here to share a personal story about his role in our Franciscan order and in the church and in our society as a gay man and as a Franciscan friar. George, welcome to Friar Time, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, David.
Can you share your personal story and the challenges that you face as a gay man and as a Franciscan friar who's gay?
Sure. So I discerned a call to join the friars, knowing what the church's stance was in terms of LGBTQ acceptance. But despite that, the call was very strong. And I said, even though I didn't feel I was in a position where I wanted to suppress or hide my sexual identity, I still felt called to be a part of an institution that, unfortunately, at least on a doctrinal institutional level, isn't as accepting, but on a pastoral level, it plays out a little bit differently. And I felt I wanted to be a part of that. So it was something I was aware of, but not enough of a deterrent to say, well, I'm not going to discern my vocation as a friar.
So even though the church itself, institutionally and doctrinally, would say that this is intrinsically disordered, you yourself saw another way, not around that, but kind of like through that, I guess, in terms of being a Franciscan. So many religious institutions, and not just religious institutions, but others, would be against LGBT rights, the whole same-sex love, same-sex marriage, all of that. But you feel a sense of acceptance. Could you tell me how that works?
Sure. And then to elaborate a little more on the point you made, because it's something I had to clarify for myself too. The church and the catechism does say we are all, every human being made in the image and likeness of God, and we're all special and unique and loved, which is wonderful and very accurate. The issue with LGBT identity, or gay specifically, is you're okay as long as you don't act on as long as there's no physical or genital intimacy, you're fine. It's just something you have to live with and suppress.
Chastity, doesn't it say celibacy?
Exactly, celibate chastity. So in that case, as a friar, I'm okay as far as doctrinally what the church's stance is, but it's an issue of, well, if I weren't a friar, how would I be living, and what is fair and inclusive for folks who are part of the church, feel they're part of the church, but at the same time are lay people who want to live as full human beings, and what does that look like? So in my case, to answer your question, yes, I did feel there was a way to work through it. And really, it didn't take long for me to be a friar, or even just in formation, where I realized, you know what, I'm not being expected to suppress who I am. And it's actually very affirming. Ironically, being a friar helped me come out more. It's not something I expected, but I was just very affirmed and encouraged. With that said, being a friar, you also avoid some of the criticism that I would have gotten otherwise, of why are you in your 20s, 30s, and now 40s and still single? You know, there's conversations that don't come up unless I choose to put them there. But with that said, I still feel that I've been able to integrate my identity, my sexual identity, into who I am as a Christian and as a friar.
So before you entered the Friars,
Mhm.
you were a business person. I think you were involved in television.
I worked in cable TV.
So during that time, your life was as a gay man, a single gay man living in New York City.
Correct.
So, and then you became a friar,
hmm
and so the vows are maintained, and so that whole set part of being gay is kind of like anybody else. It's those are the vows you've taken.
Right.
But tell me a little about like being gay in a religious community, because for some people who are watching today, they may be religious or clergy or whatever, who are also struggling with this whole idea of being gay in a church which is kind of schizophrenic, and it's like everyone is in imago Dei, in the image of God, and yet this kind of behavior is intrinsically disordered. Yet we treat everybody respect, but they can't. There's kind of like a back and forth kind of thing. Could you help some of our viewers, clergy or religious or not, anybody really who's struggling with sexual orientation?
To be clear, it is a complex existence on what the church's stance is and how these issues and dynamics play out. And there's no one way, I think, that all of us can navigate it. I'm not ordained, meaning I'm not a priest, I'm not clergy, so in some ways, I'm not on the radar as much as a priest friar who would be accountable to a diocese, to a bishop. It just plays out differently. In that sense, I'd say I dare say I have it a little easier in some respects. But with that said, we are all in it together. I have not experienced significant backlash as far as being out as a gay man, as a gay friar. It's happened, but not the positive reinforcement has been more so than the negatives. So it's sort of something I'm still navigating, I would say. I do want to be an advocate. I mean, I certainly, will put myself out there when I deem it necessary or important. And that's become more and more common. The longer I've been a friar, the more I choose to put it out there. And just, not, hi, I'm George, I'm a gay man. It's just when it's deemed, if it's a question of something where I feel that it's appropriate for me to express my identity, and whether it's to show solidarity or just to be genuine about who I am, both in my professional and pastoral role as a friar or just as a person, I've done it, both within my family and professional circles and as a friar. But within communities, as far as the way we live together, thankfully, I've always felt very much affirmed, and it's just
You never felt any resistance?
not within our
The
communities,
friars.
the friar communities, yeah.
Do you see, what about if somebody said to you, I don't see how it's compatible for you to be a Franciscan friar and gay? What would you say to somebody?
Um, I would certainly affirm that individual and say, I do understand where you're coming from. It's something I struggled with initially, but it didn't deter me from still becoming a part of this community and discerning this life. On the one hand, it doesn't make any sense. Why would I choose to be part of an organization that doesn't affirm me in my complete existence and complete identity? I would share very honestly that I didn't grow up in a family where I was affirmed in every aspect of who I was. And it doesn't mean I hate my family. We have like any family, we have our issues, but I think it's a little more complex than that. It still felt important to me to be a part of a church and a community despite its stance on this issue. With that said, I do respect LGBT folks who say, look, I know the church has its values and its positive aspects and initiatives, but I can't be a part of something that doesn't accept me. And those who I've met who feel that way, they're living, for the most part, living good lives. They're being good people. Sadly, they're not a part of the church, even if they were raised Catholic or identify. And yet there's other LGBTQ folks I've met and worked with who say, all right, we're not accepted. We understand this. And as lay people, they still feel they want to be involved in ministries and do different things. And that's very inspiring. It's not the same vocational journey that I've had, but at the same time, it's okay, look, we see what church's stance is, and maybe change needs to happen from within, and just to show that we're all a part of it regardless. We're already in. It's not like we're not being accepted. We're already a part of it somehow. It's just how open and how affirming an environment is it.
I was talking to a man who had been a part of a LGBT Catholic group in one of our places, who had left when the church came out with this dictum about disordered and morally disordered, etc. And in the conversation, I'd be interested to see how you would consider the question that we just talked about. He said to me, "You're a therapist." I said, "Yes." He said, "If someone said to you they were in an abusive relationship, would you tell them to stay in it?" And I said, "Of course not. No, I would never do that." He said, "Then why are you telling me to stay in a relationship with the Catholic Church?" And I have to say, I had no answer to that. I had no answer to that. I think it's a valid way of looking at it. How would you respond to him? I couldn't.
That's a tough question. I don't think I'd be able to respond to him either. I guess I'd like to start with a brief story and then get to your answer.
Sure.
So I have two friends, a gay couple who I met through a running group that I used to belong to. And they both Catholic, raised Catholic, and they very involved in their church. Sunday ushers, ministers, do all sorts of different things, and they decided to get married. And they realized they couldn't have a religious ceremony in the Catholic Church, so they went down the block and had a religious ceremony at the local Episcopal Church, and went right back to ministering and ushering and participating in the Catholic Church. And their stance, again, it's not that it's appropriate or for everyone. It's just the way that they embraced it. Said, look, it's our church. We get what the rules are. We'll abide by them. But at the same time, this is, we want to affirm our relationship in a religious setting. We can't do it in the Catholic Church. We can do it in the Episcopal, and we'll go right back to living and working in the Catholic Church. So I guess my short answer is there's no one fit for everybody within the church. I think the person who said that to you was, I understand where they're coming from for sure. And yet there's another side of the spectrum where there's folks who are willing to work with it. There isn't a clean answer for that. I don't know that I can articulate for myself either. It just feels right. And at the same time, respecting this diversity of opinions and that it's not for everybody. But I do think there's value in, if it's an institution you love, not an abusive relationship, but if it's an institution or organization you love, exploring change from within and revealing God's kingdom, as the gospel teaches us, and trying to work with it and make it better. That's.
I think it's Avery Dulles who said, "The Catholic Church. Oh, here comes everyone."
Yeah.
So I think for many of our viewers, maybe one of the major things is that you hear it in our habit, the Franciscan habit, and you're a gay man, a Franciscan friar. What is the Franciscan component of this, George, that kind of pulls you right into this whole community and says that the idea of the Franciscan charism makes a big difference in how you view the world and how the world views you?
I think at its foundation, the Franciscan charism is very incarnational, right? So we embody bringing Jesus to life through who we are and what we do, as we got to know him through the Gospels. In this case, as far as my gay identity, that's a very foundational part of who I am. There's risk in sharing that part about myself. I could avoid it, really, in large part, if I wanted to as a friar. But it's important because there's a connection made. It doesn't mean that every gay person would agree with my discernment or my journey in life, but at least it's something where, wow, this guy's he's gay and he's a part of that. So maybe there is an opportunity, or there's more to this church than I realized. At least in my experience, it's opened up a conversation and a possible connection that might not be there otherwise. I know at the college where I was working most recently, it was not my intention to come out because I was concerned about with young people and the students. I wasn't sure how they would read that, but once I realized that I was in a situation and a job expectation where my role was to affirm students' identity, these young people, whether it's racial, ethnic, LGBTQ, I said, well, if I'm not willing to do it too, I don't think I'll be as effective an advocate and as a mentor for them. So to get back to your question, I think that incarnational, bringing Jesus to life and understanding that sexual identity is something we've been gifted with. The culture and our society doesn't always treat us in that way, but it's still something that comes from God, and it makes a connection with folks that might not be there otherwise.
Do you see being gay as a gift from God?
I do. It's a gift that's come with a great deal of pain, in terms of acceptance from my family, from the larger culture. I mean, I grew up in New York City. I love this city, but despite how open and diverse it is, it doesn't mean that there isn't, you can't be the victim of prejudice and bias. And I think many of us go through that. So I've come to appreciate it as a gift. It is an important part of who I am, but it's a gift that's come with significant pain and retribution, as far as being open about it. Granted, I'm not saying I've gotten it the worst, I mean, there's sadly, a whole spectrum of situations and conflicts and violence that can happen to people who identify as LGBTQ. But as far as me seeing it as something coming from God, yes, I've come to terms with that. Sometimes it's still a struggle, but I do appreciate it as an important part of who I am. That's God given.
Um, as you just mentioned in terms of violence, um, Jesus did not advocate violence. And Christians generally do not advocate for violence. And yet, that kind of violence has been directed toward the LGBT community in so many ways, whether it be legislatively in some of the states who deny uh, transgender individuals medical assistance, or tearing down a gay flag, as we saw recently and not too many months ago, a variety of ways, or just out and out discrimination against the gay community on so many different levels. So what would you say to somebody who is advocating violence is obviously unacceptable, but not just violence, but just disrespect and demeaning people because of their sexual orientation? As a Catholic, a Christian, a Franciscan, what would you say to these people?
No, I think that if there's any side of the coin to err on, it's the side of being too inclusive versus not inclusive enough. And by that, I don't mean anything goes, the church just has to accept everything. I don't mean that. But I think that when it comes to another Franciscan theme that's very important to me and many of us is this building bridges with the poor and marginalized. Err on the side of inclusion. Engage first before, whether it's something as simple as making a comment or not putting enough thought into legislation or advocacy for folks that not unfortunately, just the reality is we don't choose this identity. For folks who think that, again, I can't argue and just change your mind by saying it, but none of us choose our sexual identity. It's given to us, we're born with it, and then we work with it. It doesn't mean that if we're not part of the norm, if we're not part of the dominant identity, we're inferior. It's not about that. So even if we don't understand each other, our gospel call and the message from Jesus is love each other. Doesn't mean anything goes, but love each other and work to build that bridge, and maybe we can form some mutual understanding. But just the extent of attacking someone, or whether it's on a child's playground or all the way up to something more violent or atrocious, or in terms of legal law and legal environments, erring on the side of too much inclusion versus putting someone down just because we don't understand or because they make us feel uncomfortable. That's never appropriate.
Mhm. Thank you. That was well said. Is there any last message you'd like to tell our viewers who are struggling in whatever place in life they are, who are struggling with their sexual orientation and coming to grips with who they are and who God has created them to be?
Sure, I would say, at some level, we've all been there. So definitely know that you're not alone. Even if the church has not treated you well or been the most accepting in this regard, know that there's some of us who share that part of your journey and your identity, and there's always a resource for you. Whether or not you're actively part of a church, it doesn't matter, but just know that the church is very diverse. Hopefully, you're getting a window into some of the more accepting aspects of the church and possible resources and people for you. So just know you're not alone. At our best, we project the gospel and radical inclusivity, to coin a term I learned from a colleague, Father Brian Massengale, promoting radical inclusivity. That's what we're trying to do, and to bring God's kingdom to life. And if we can ever be a resource for you, just know there's people in the church who are willing to do that.
Thank you very much, George.
Sure.
There's information being flashed on the screen of places you can go to, people you can contact if you are struggling or you'd like to help others in terms of sexual orientation and their life in our society, in or outside of the church. But as Franciscans, please know that we believe you are loved, you are cared for, and you are accepted.
Yes.
Thank you for being here with George and myself in Friar Time. See you soon. If you or someone you know is seeking help for LGBTQ plus related concerns, please visit the LGBTQ plus hotline website at www.lgbthotline.org or call the LGBTQ National Hotline at 888-688-5424. In an emergency, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255 or call 911.